Greetings, Metallurgist Marty here from Heavy Metallurgy with yet another review. This time, we're going to be talking about some old school death metal. Not maybe the old school you're thinking of, not the modern stuff. No. These are a couple bands I'm covering today that have people in them that are probably over 40 years old. So we're talking the good stuff here. So let's get into it. All right, today I will be talking about the third full-length album from New York's Hypoxia called Defiance. It came out on February 23rd, 2024 via Self-Made God Records. This is the first time I have ever heard Hypoxia, or even heard of Hypoxia, to be honest with you. They formed in 2011, and they are a New York City, Queens-based death metal band formed by ex-members of Monstrosity, Vile, Secrecy, Castrator, Total Fucking Destruction, and some others. And honestly, if you look at the album cover on here, I don't know what made me want to listen to it, because the looks of the album cover, although the artwork is very cool, it is very much looking like a brutal slam death metal styled album. And ultimately, that stuff has its place. I do like that style, but it's not something that I reach for or want in my musical diet that often, we'll say. But clicked on the promo, check it out, and was pretty much blown away by what Hypoxia was unleashing. Expect a proper old school death metal foundation with more complex riff ideas at times to hint at a tech appreciation. Due to the fact that their guitars aren't super low tuned, there's more of a closer to a standard E tuning, although I don't think they're E. They might be a D or something like that. I don't know for sure. But it gives this material a thrash component, though they never fully embrace that. It's just kind of in the tightness of their sound. There are even some grind-slanted riff ideas and frantic blast beats incorporated that lends an overall aggression, giving Defiance an aura of an excitement. The production, clear and heavy. The clean bass tone lurks below the surface and adds power. Guitars have a distorted but sharp clarity, meaning the tone isn't slathered in too much gain, which allows the fluent motion and the notes and the riffs to cut through. Mike Hrubovac's vocals sit atop this mix perfectly, giving his atypical and enunciated performance the space to really capitalize on the varying movements within each track. And I gotta say, getting back to the old school death metal thing, I had kind of a little dig at the beginning. There's this movement that's been going on. It's become quite overpopulated, which scenes typically tend to do until they start to taper off a bit. But there's a big OSDM movement that's been going on for a while. Old school death metal. Typically younger guys trying to emulate the sounds of the past. And they do so by way of incantation, borrowing that cavernous feel of the early incantation albums like Onward to Golgotha, Mortal Throne of Nazarene, and typically simplifying the riffs down to just really heavy crunch, heavy riffs due to the fact that they're tuned to A, standard A. And you tune that low, it dictates the way that you play. When I mention old school death metal in the context of New York's Hypoxia, I mean they actually write riffs with substance and structure and songs. These riffs, they tend to be a little more technical, a little more busy, a little more memorable. They congeal into a song that recalls certain parts. And I do enjoy the new OSDM movement. I think there's a lot of really good bands in it. But I also think that it's a sound that's kind of eating itself at this point. It doesn't offer a lot of things that are new. So, cut back to Hypoxia. Are they offering anything new? Technically, they are offering exactly what I would have expected in the early 90s. Memorable songs with a lot of depth, a lot of power, a lot of impact, a lot of intensity. And the vocal performance, Mike, his vocals, he really enunciates extremely well, and he goes between lower death growls into higher screams, and sometimes they layer them together for a nice layered effect. You can understand what the guy is saying, and there's a lot of feeling and power and push behind the words. It's not just, dissonant from the crypt moaning. There's actual form and attack to these vocals. Having said all that, Hypoxia have really surprised me with this effort. It's a 35-minute long listen, so you're not going to really be investing a lot of time on this. So Hypoxia gets in and gets out at a kind of the perfect time for this style of music, and we're going to get into the track breakdown a little bit here to discuss further what's going on. So the leadoff track, Bleed for Blasphemy, gives you a painful glimpse into the fact that you're about to be steamrolled by some very well-crafted death metal, straight up. Powerful timing changes are strengthened by twin guitar lines that ring through with sinister melodicism and return to an inventive mix of palm-muted crunch and more straight-up tremolo-based riffs. Yes, the band is using all the common songwriting staples utilized by countless musicians before them, but their skill and obvious love for this style of music becomes quickly apparent as Defiance unfolds.
Piece of creation, reason to blasphemy, in case of birth of life. Separate, devotion.
The track Correlated Embolism is among my favorites from this album. Such an effective use of speed and dynamics, just when you feel like the double bass driven mid-pace verse section of the song has punished you sufficiently. The songs become even more intense with a quicker and more intense pace, before ending with well-considered blast beats. The riffs never lose sight of memorability, yet remain dripping with perfectly crafted sickness. The musical ideas just have a stank on them, and the songwriter's penchant for old, evil, and memorable death metal empowers every song on Defiance. I also love the way they double certain phrases in the vocal lines for effect. It's a simple technique that adds so much to the intensity of this band's sound. Agonized Asphyxia demonstrates yet another expertly crafted song with a ripping solo at the center of it, where modern death metal bands trying to sound old often overlook this important element. Solos are another important part of Hypoxia's identity. You can tell the members come from the era where guitar slingers are indeed important. Good solo, great song. Drowning in Darkness is 6 songs in and reveals the band's first proper breakdown on the album. It may be nothing new on display here, but you can easily envision a crowd of metalheads ripping each other apart in the pit when this crushing groove is laid down. It only happens once in the song and isn't a focal point for Hypoxia and their songwriting arsenal. I really like the lead-up riff to this breakdown as well. And I gotta say, I mentioned earlier in this review about, the cover kind of hinting at more of a brutal death metal or slam death metal. The breakdown here kind of hints at that respect, that they do maybe listen to that a little bit. And there's some riffs and some song structures that hit every once in a while that does give a nod of appreciation to that, but they never fully embrace it. Too Far Gone fires off with a scathing blast and savage tremolo riff before the false harmonic squawks add heightened level of perplexity. This is perhaps the fastest and most intense track on the album. Michael Pogion's bass work is particularly animated on this song with ultra-technical bass lines cutting through the space just behind the guitars. This one is a complete ripper from start to finish. Black Omens offers more melodic and slower musical moments where Hypoxia focuses on picking through the notes of a chord progression, which gives the song and album a more evil presence that hasn't been fully realized until now. This idea allows for more drawn-out and emotive solo work to come in and further offer a different side of the band's songwriting style. Serpents of Gaia and Scorched and Skinned continue with expertly crafted and dynamic death metal before they close the album in much the same way it begins, an acoustic instrumental / outro that perfectly bookends 35 minutes of energetic and potent death metal. I mentioned it earlier, but at 35 minutes, Defiance doesn't overstay its welcome. There's a lot of hard-hitting, complicated riffs on here, but again, the band never loses sight of melody. They never lose sight of memorability. The songs are catchy. There's good recalling of riffs, so even if a song tends to get a bit complex, they repeat things just the right amount of times to give the song a proper structure. It doesn't feel like a bunch of linear tracks on here. There's choruses, there's excellent verses, there's very powerful music breaks. It's all layered together here perfectly. And I gotta say, a band like this, I clicked on it just to thinking I was going to hear bree, 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 and, breakdown after breakdown after breakdown. They surprised me. It's an old school death metal attack. And on their third album, it makes me kind of curious to hear where this came from. I mean, obviously, the pedigree of all these guys in the band, there's a lot of bigger bands here, all the way from classic death metal to total fucking destruction, grind. I mean, they've got it all. And Defiance kind of is a amalgamation of all of that stuff put together, but never straying from an old death metal formula. So yeah, if you're into old school death metal and you want a shorter punch to the face, this Defiance by Hypoxia is definitely a worthy addition to your collection. And now for a call to arms. I'm going to be talking about the debut full-length release by Kentucky's Sinistrum called Infernal Dawn. This album dropped on February 2nd, 2024. It came out digitally and on cassette by Morbid and Miserable Records and on CD by Adirondack Black Mass. Apparently, a vinyl edition will also be produced by Adirondack Black Mass at a later date this year. So, Kentucky's Sinistrum, they occupy a similar old school space in the death metal continuum as Hypoxia, as members from Sinistrum come from other bands you may have heard of, namely Sarcoma and Abominant. Two bands that date back to the early 90s, making them officially there when it happened. So you know right away that they're going to be coming from maybe more of a place of authenticity. Musically, Sinistrum creates a very 90s era death metal sound and overall feel. Lots of galloping, mid-paced riffs as found on Godforsaken and Bleeding. And even though some blasts do enter into the equation for them, it's used more as an accent than a focal point. Again, much like the early 90s style, when there was still a bit of thrash clinging to the brutality before the blast beat fully took over. Their riffs are very memorable thanks to an appreciation for stripped-down writing style, with more focus on very powerful melody lines and flow within the riffs themselves, and some impressive solo work. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the vocalist, Scott Briggs. He is, I think, an important focal point of this band. His vocal style is well-rounded and powerful. His higher register screams are unique thanks to a sick rattle at the back of his throat, but he chooses to center the bulk of his performance on an equally foul, lower growling style. When the two are layered together, they stack layers on some choruses or at the end of a phrase. One can't help but pick out a bit of a Glenn Benton contrast. Having said that, Scott still maintains his own unique presence on the mic, and his use of different styles benefits the end result. The production highlights the old school essence of this band. Everything cuts through the mix as it should, but the overall presentation isn't perfected, sterile, or brick-walled to the max. It sounds like a band playing live in their rehearsal space, warts and all, but with production values and depth. The sound field captures the conviction, which is the obvious driving factor of this band. So let's dig into the tracks a little bit. Abomination Rising kicks off with fierce blasting featuring an undeniably Morbid Angel-inspired verse riff to demonstrate one of the influences that Sinistrum wears proudly on their sleeve. Legacy and Barbarity find Sinistrum evolving a bit further to embrace their melodic side. The lead-off set of riffs are very infectious thanks to clever repetition of the idea, but shifting between similar note runs for more impact. Scott even belts out a verse of clean singing to add something new to the sound before going back into the brutality. He pulls it off flawlessly, and it somehow offers both a feeling of darkness and triumph. I don't know if I'd be really psyched about an album solely composed on this style, but it's a nice offering of variety without sacrificing their overall attack. Putting it near the middle of the album was also a good spot for it. Morbid Reality is another well-constructed song, but also demonstrates the one minor critique I have regarding Infernal Dawn. Early in this track, there's a verse riff which is simple in nature and works fine under Scott's vocals. Where it becomes a bit uncomfortable for me is that it feels they play it a bit longer than the riff warrants. It happens a few times on this song and album, but not enough to take away from the overall quality. Sinistrum are quite proficient at creating simplistic riffs with substance and flow, but don't always capitalize on the spaces that call for an offsetting, more complex riff or musical break. But when they do so on tracks like Deus Mortis, it demonstrates the quality songwriting chops members of this band have been perfecting for decades. So this album is a bit of a lengthier listen than Hypoxia, and thankfully Sinistrum, they try some things in about midpoint of the album to varying degrees of success. I really like their old school feel of the music. I like the fact that they're not blasting all the time. I think the songs are really well constructed. I do think that a couple of the riffs here and there go on a bit longer than they needed to, but that all boils down to point of preference from the songwriter perspective. So if you're going through a list of bands and you're into death metal and you kind of want to break away from the cavernous howl of modernized old school death metal, Sinistrum's another band that should be on your list to check out to get a bit of that old spirit and feel. Again, authenticity is here in spades for sure. So that's it for me. Hopefully I presented you a couple bands worth checking out, and if you enjoyed this review, guess what? Myself and my colleagues, we're doing them every week. We're going to try to step up the production a little bit more as we get going closer to summertime. But we appreciate all of you. Be sure to check out the reviews on this channel. Check out our live streams. Subscribe, like, all that fun stuff. I hate even saying it, but we appreciate you and you help with the channel grow. But until next time, stay sick. Keep it old school death metal. What